It's actually 2 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get this show on the road. Thank you all for coming here. This is Concurrent Session 2C, Meet the Press. We'll be talking about techniques for facilitating news and media coverage. My name is Mark Johnson. I'm the Director of Marketing at the Public Library of Science, also known as PLOS. And I have a fantastic panel lined up today to talk about media and news coverage. So starting from my left, we have Linda Aylesworth. She's a reporter from Global BC News here in the Vancouver area. Delighted to have her, a real television personality here for you today, so that's great. Seated to her left is Brian Lynn. Brian is the Director of Editorial Content Strategy at Eureka Alert, and previously he was also located here in the Vancouver area doing media work for University of British Columbia. And to Brian's left, your far right, is Heather Amos. Heather is the social media relations specialist at the University of British Columbia, and she's going to give us the kind of institutional perspective on media coverage. So great panel. But before we start talking to you, I wanted to ask some questions. So first of all, how many of you have a background in journalism? Quite a few people. That's great. Okay. Of those that didn't raise their hands, are you journal editors or publishers? Okay. How many of you have full-time employee resources in your organization that are devoted to media coverage? Wow. Okay. This is great. We're preaching to the audience here. Preaching to the choir, as they say. Now, I expect fewer hands then. So how many of you do not have FTEs focused on media coverage? How many of you have that as, it's not even part of your day job? You're like volunteering for media coverage. Yeah, okay, great. Well, that's good. That helps us understand who the audience is. So, and I think that for those of you that don't have a lot of resources, the next, my talk is going to be a little bit helpful. So at PLOS, we really just created our press program starting in July 2015. And I'm going to give you some lessons that we learned as part of that. Before I jump in, I want to give due credit to my colleague, Jennifer LaLoupe. Jen is the PLOS editorial media manager, and she oversees the team at PLOS, the relatively new team that we created last July to help generate media coverage. And she did most of these slides. I'm just channeling her. So a quick overview on PLOS Press. So a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, also known as San Francisco, California, where the Public Library of Science is located, 7 journals are published. And before July 2015, we had 7 different media programs. Each journal ran their press release programs separately, and it was all done almost on a voluntary basis. People were squeezing the work in that was above and beyond their day jobs because they knew that media was important and frankly it was kind of fun. Well, we changed that in July. We decided that we would get a lot more bang for our buck if we took the part-time from this journal and the part-time from this journal and the part-time from that journal, and we consolidated into 3 full-time employee roles that would then support all 7 of the journals, that we could be a bit more efficient about that and actually coordinate our efforts, keep the journals informed of what the other journals were doing, and really just get more bang for our buck. And so that's what we did. I would say the first thing in terms of getting started is understanding who is going to be involved, the processes that you need, and the tools that you're going to use. And we spent a lot of time kind of gathering up, because there were 7 different teams that were doing this, we actually had 7 different processes and 7 different tool sets that were being used. So that was an opportunity for creating efficiencies. That was a good thing. So we came up with our plan, and we found that it was really important when we were putting our plan together that we communicated with all of the stakeholders, the editorial team that helped us select which articles that they thought would be really of interest and pressworthy, the publishing services teams that are helping the papers move through the system, the technology team for the downstream tools. We had to be on we had to communicate really well with all of those different groups. And in a way, we had to build trust with each of those groups. And that was really important. We had to earn the trust of the editors that once they identified the articles to press release, that we could create press releases that didn't exaggerate the science, that didn't overpromise the medicine, that was very realistic. And we put our plan into action. The good news is that when we put the plan into action, the teams came along on board. The trust was built. We eliminated the use of some of those tools that were extraneous, and we focused on the tools that gave us a big bang for buck. And we have already started to see some returns on that investment. So we have a thing called Slice of PLOS. These are blog posts done by PLOS Biology editor Rolly Roberts, and he will mention articles that have been press released in PLOS Biology, but he'll also connect it back to other research that PLOS has previously published. And so we're creating kind of synergies in that way, and it's pretty cool. So this is what I would call the science news media supply chain as we implement it at PLOS. And I think that Heather and Brian will have some differing opinions on some of the order of these steps. And this is important. Each of you are going to have to understand what your own processes are, and it may not necessarily be in this order. But for PLOS, we start with the researcher submitting the article to the journal. The journal provides the peer review services and accepts it for publication. Once it's accepted for publication, there's another editorial review that decides which of those articles that are accepted for publication are significant enough to warrant a press release or might be interesting enough and appeal to the mainstream. Once we decide that, right now, we then hire freelancers to help us write the press releases, or those 3 people that are full-time, they will write the press releases. And once we have the press releases, we then confirm the article publication date. That becomes the embargo date, and we can distribute those press releases. Now, I put an asterisk by our staff writing the press releases because I think that Brian and Heather might suggest that that actually is the good opportunity to trigger the downstream to the institutions and start communicating with the author institutions. Once they know that their paper has been accepted, then maybe they can help write those press releases. At PLOS, we haven't really taken advantage of that yet, so we're working on that. So continuing on, unfortunately, after we've set the embargo and written the press release, then we reach out to the PIOs, so a little bit late. The PIOs can help generate more exposure. The press releases are posted to services like Eureka Alert, which Brian is going to talk about. Journalists like Linda review the list of publications that we have and decide what to cover or not. The journalists write their articles or film their videos about the research. And then, hopefully, at the embargo time, all of the news media coverage is published along with the original research article. And much exposure is generated and everybody's happy. That's what we want to happen. So at PLOS, I mentioned we used a lot of tools. So what we've kind of settled on is a couple of different tools that we're using for our database of who the press reps are. So we use Salesforce because that's what the organization uses for all of our people data. But we also use Cision, previously called Vocus, exclusively for our media lists. We use Eureka Alert as the platform where the press releases are made available. We use a lot of social media to help promote the articles once they're published, and we use a tool called Hootsuite to help control all of our different social media accounts. And then we use Trello for our task management. We use WordPress for our blogs and the traditional email and Google Docs. On the right-hand side there, you'll see some suggested books that we used while we were coming up with the plan. And the good news is it seems to be working. So PLOS articles were covered over 50 times by the New York Times last year, which is really awesome. And that was one of the things that helped us justify 3 FTEs. We were getting little bits of coverage here and there, but since we've consolidated and started increasing our output of press releases, the coverage has gone up. And that's a really good thing. The media coverage is good for the journal brand. It helps generate demands for submissions. It's also a wonderful selling point for authors. Authors love it when you press release their work. It's a great benefit for them. Another thing that I would be remiss being from PLOS if I didn't mention is that open access actually helps the press process. So our articles are published by a CC by attribution license. So that has a nice benefit to the media in that they don't have to worry about securing rights for reuse for figures and tables that might be published with the article. They can use that as part of their publication. So that's a really, really nice thing. And the other thing that's really nice is that you don't have to worry about putting that specific research article outside of your paywall when the embargo lifts. When that article is getting media coverage, anybody that sees that coverage can go to the article and read it if they so desire. So we keep track of the media coverage that happens. PLOS has article level metrics, and here you can kind of see metrics for a very popular article from last year, from 2014, about sliding rocks in the playa. And it got a lot of media coverage, which resulted in a lot of downloads and views. And in the related content section of the PLOS article view, there's a place where we can crowdsource the media coverage. So if you see an article that's covered in the mainstream media or in the scientific press, you could go to that article on the PLOS website and you can upload that information so that there's a link from the research article out to the coverage, in addition from the coverage linking back to the article. It's really nice. And here's some detail on how you submit that information to us. So I'll wrap up my part of the talk and just kind of recap the lessons that we learned. So the first is that a really, really clear remit will help you in your press goals. Our remit was to consolidate our process and generate more press coverage. And by consolidating the process, we were able to increase our output, the number of press releases that we produce each week, and that has had the desired knock-on effect to generate a bit more coverage. So that's good. Second item, trust is really critical. We had to build relationships with all of the different parts of our team. And that's something that doesn't happen overnight, but over time, I think we've built the trust, and they're now happy to select the articles that get press released and let us write the releases. Third thing is the right tools can save you time and money. So we talked about the different tools that we have. I would recommend Eureka Alert. Brian didn't pay me to say that. I would recommend Vocus. It's not great, but it gets the job done. Content matters. The most important thing about generating press coverage is just having a timely and impactful bit of research to report on. I mean, without the content, reporters aren't going to pick up and open the press release and report on it. OA helps, and authors perceive this press release process as a big benefit. They really like that coverage. and I'll say thank you. We're going to hold our questions. What we'd like to do is have a discussion session after everybody talks. So at this point, I am going to turn things over to Heather.